the thing that I've just been stuck on is this video that I saw from Katy Perry's international tour, right? She's been adding material to it, and one of the things that she recently did in her opener for the song Part of Me is that
this is the part of me that you're never, ever, ever going to take away from me.
You're not going to do it. Anyway, the lyric originally is, "Days like this, I want to drive away." And apparently at a recent stop, instead she said,
I just wanna throw my social media away.
Josh and I have, as of the last 15 minutes, been throwing this into just about every song that you can imagine.
It goes particularly well with old-timey hymns.
Well, that's because
great,
of who we are. You know, when peace like a river attendeth throw my social media away. When sorrows like sea billows roll. You know, just so people know the rest of the song.
Whatever the cost, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my social media, which I'm throwing away.
Which, incidentally, if you haven't heard yet, I'm deleting it. Or one might say, metaphorically, that I'm throwing it away.
Somebody told me you had a girlfriend that threw her social media away.
See, it's really addictive, isn't it?
It is really fun. Yeah.
Are we human, or are we throwing our social media away?
Do we want to just keep doing these?
Yes.
No,
keep going.
Okay.
It's killing me. It's throwing my social media away.
Speaking words of wisdom, throw your social media away.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast to throw our social media away. I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Brians. And this week we are talking about something that has nothing to do with social media or
Not
Katy
even a
Perry,
little bit.
Because
I would think Rick would throw his social media away.
Rick is the kind of motherfucker to be like, yeah, I don't do social media.
I don't do social media.
And if you don't know what we're talking about regarding Rick, we decided to
I'm
Casablanca
Pickle
or two.
Rick.
Also, yes, Josh. Anyway, the three of us.
What I saw there was Frieza's Ray and Goku's Ray meeting in the middle and fighting, and I wanted to watch it explode.
So all of us decided to Casablanca or two. I hate it when my Blanca gets cost.
Me too. It makes me want to throw my social media away.
Away!
This was one where we were like, look, we've done a few episodes now where we've had some good guests on. We've played games that are 10s or 20s of hours long, and
I love it when something is 20s of hours long.
That's what The Last of Us 2 felt like.
Yes,
it felt
it
like
did.
it was many 20s of hours long.
Andrew Jackson's of hours.
And so we were just like, you know what? Let's go back to an old-timey classic, right?
Yeah.
And AJ, you really love Casablanca, right?
I love Casablanca, and I came to it late, actually. That's
Like,
sort of the crazy thing about
recently,
Casablanca.
right? Like just in the last couple of years?
Yeah, it was in the last like 5 or 6 years. Actually, no, that is not true. I first watched Casablanca maybe a few years out of college because my good friend Hollis Beck, friend of the pod, it had a drinking game blog that she had set up. And I think I talked about this a little bit with Showgirls, but that was one of the ones we talked about with Showgirls.
Okay.
And so she also hosted a drinking game where we watched Casablanca for the first time, which started out as being like, let's all like get drunk and rib on this movie. And by the end, the entire room was silent and we were all crying. It is one of those movies that you think is going to feel so distant, you know, and feel like so old-timey because it's like the classic. It's the one that was like the top of the AFI list for like years and years and years as being like one of the best movies of all time. And So you think that it's going to be distant in the way that a lot of the when we talk about fancy movies on Fancy Movie Time, that those are going to feel like of a different era, of a different bygone age, and then you watch Casablanca and you're like, this is what it feels like to live in America in 2025 in a way that I was just not anticipating. Because back then, when I watched
It wasn't
the first time,
2025.
Yeah.
it wasn't. It was all about the love story for me, right? It was all about
Sure.
this sort of like long lost love, and when you're just out of college and feeling all your feelings about like your first maybe big relationships are ending, or you've experienced heartbreak perhaps for the first time.
Somebody might have had that happen to them.
Yeah, maybe.
And you're listening to a lot of Sarah Bareilles.
Yes,
Perhaps.
maybe. Perhaps.
And maybe
so-
you're getting a friend of yours to direct a show about that. And then that
Yeah.
friend you end up starting a podcast with later on alongside another friend who saw that show
Yeah,
when
right
he came
after
to New
moving
York for
to
the
New
first
York,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it has become a very different film for me from the first time I saw it. And I actually just recently got to see it in a movie theater. I went to the Paris theater with past guest Jeff Ronan, who was on our Alien episode, who took me to see it. And I got to sit behind somebody who was seeing it for the first time, who gasped at every plot twist in this movie.
fun.
And when a famous line came up of like, here's looking at you, kid, or of all the gin joints in all the world, like literally pointed at the screen and went, "Ah!"
Did
like,
the Leo
freaked out,
point,
like,
yeah.
and like clapped
Yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
hands and was like sobbing throughout. Like it was a genuinely really, really lovely experience. And so I was just like, yeah, we haven't talked about Casablanca on the podcast, and
Yeah.
it kind of feels built for us in a
Except
strange
for the
way.
fact that I don't think it's a very good movie.
Yes,
Interesting.
but I also think that that's why it's built for us.
And I think I'm kind of, as often seems to end up being the case, when either side, like we always triangulate positions somehow. Where like,
Yeah.
if
Right.
one of us likes it and the other doesn't like it, the third will be in the middle. And I think that's where I am on this. That there was
Josh
some.
is always the centrist on the
That's
podcast.
right. Characteristic centrist behavior from me that you know
he's
and love.
donated thousands of dollars to the Lincoln Project.
What is your history with this movie, Brian? Did you watch it at some point?
yeah, no,
or-
we had it. I've talked about. I think this is a relatively universal millennial experience. We had a lot of bookshelves full of blank tapes. Right? Movies and TV shows and things that we had taped off of the TV. Of course, this
Got it,
wasn't an
yeah.
experience for you, Josh, because you didn't have television.
Well, actually,
your parents decided to throw their TV away.
Actually, what happened was, so my grandpa was a movie collector, and
Okay.
he had walls and walls of retail videotapes.
And I mean, we had our retail tapes as well, but like we had a lot of blank tapes because we were, if not ethnically, then spiritually Dutch, and we like to save money wherever we can. So, I had a TV cut of Casablanca that I remember not really watching that much growing up, and then in like high school, I was like, I think I've maybe seen parts of this movie or some shit. Let's pop it in and let's watch it. So I popped in that blank tape of Casablanca, fast forwarded through the toothbrush commercials or whatever. And, I love a lot of old movies. I've never had much of a problem liking a movie from the 1930s or 40s or even 20s. And in high school, I was like really getting into movies and silent movies and not quite foreign movies yet because I didn't know where to look yet. But like, the classics, the things that you were told were the big things of the last 100 years. And Casablanca left almost no impression on me whatsoever
Oh, interesting.
when I watched it the first time.
That is so fascinating to me, Brian, as a dramaturgy nerd that I know that you are, to
Yeah.
like go into Casablanca and to not sort of marvel at just like the Swiss watchness.
Yeah,
of
well,
the
I think I
script.
wasn't a dramaturgy nerd at that point. I didn't understand the mechanics of storytelling and why I like the things that I like. And then I watched it again right at the end of college. I took an American film class as like the last thing in my film major. And it was on the list. And I was like, you know what? It's been a long time since I've seen this movie. I should also say, when I watched it with, it was me and my parents watching it, and they also didn't care much for the movie at all. They kept it
interesting.
around, but like, so I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to see what this does for me now. And again, I watched it, and I was like, am I just missing something? Is there something happening in this movie that I'm not catching on to? and that's why it's not resonating with me. And then, of course, we do the in-class discussion about it. The professor is effusively talking about all of these things that are things I saw. It's like, yes, the movie does do that. I don't think it's brilliant that it does that, but I see it's there. So it's just a movie that straight up, flat out, doesn't totally work for me. I will say I had probably the best time I've had with this movie this time around.
Okay.
But it still lost me, and we'll talk about that when that happens.
Incredible.
Well, just I guess to balance it out, I watched it for the first time for the show and had not seen it before. As I was saying, my opinion kind of triangulated between the two of you. The thing that I'm interested in talking about is, well, first of all, what you were mentioning, AJ, that just how much this captures the feeling of living in times where things are very, very dangerous. And you don't know, like you're actively thinking about getting out or who's getting out and how and when and what it means to continue living even in those circumstances, I think is one of the things I'm interested in. I'm also very interested in talking about Humphrey Bogart's performance.
Yes.
And what about it is so singular even now, all these years later. So I think we're gonna have a lot of good stuff to talk about. And we might as well get into the way that this movie, sort of a little bit of background about how this movie got made, right, Brian?
For me, this is the interesting shit right here.
Sure.
And it is incredibly interesting.
Because I do remember, because I was also getting really into theater in high school and reading a lot of plays and buy a dramatist play service script off of Amazon or whatever of a play that I heard about. And opening credits, you see, based on the play, everybody comes to Rick's.
Or like everybody comes on Rick's.
More like everybody's Pickle Rick.
Yeah, everyone's coming on Pickle
Yeah, more like everybody throws their social media
away.
It is more like that, yeah.
So this was written by Joan Allison and Murray Burnett. These are not well-known names, really.
No.
They also wrote a play that I had heard of before called What Are Little Boys Made Of?
Sugar, spice,
Well,
and
no.
everything nice.
That's what little
No,
girls
it's
are
the
made
opposite.
Of. Boys
It's-
are
it's
snip,
the-
snails, and puppy dog tails.
Oh, yeah.
Puppy dog
right,
tails.
sorry.
Yeah.
These are the ingredients Professor Utonium made to make the perfect little boys.
No, Mojo Jojo did it.
He made the Rowdy Rough Boys?
Yeah,
He made the Rowdy
He
Rough
made them in
Boys.
a prison toilet, and that's why they
Right,
came
right,
out
right.
that way.
I met Mojo Jojo once, the voice of Mojo Jojo. When I was
No,
on
no,
boat.
no. You met Mojo Jojo.
The real guy.
Yes,
Yeah,
the real
he's
man.
very-
Yes,
he's really actually quite down to earth. Yeah, these are not super well known people. Joan Allison wrote a few things here and there. Murray Burnett at this point in time was a school teacher, so I don't know how they met up or anything like that. But they started writing a couple plays together. They wrote another anti-Nazi play that also didn't get produced. That's the main thing. Everybody Comes to Rick's did not get produced until the 1990s in the UK.
Wow, I didn't know it was ever produced.
Yeah, it was done. It actually even transferred to the West End for a time.
Huh.
But they called it Everybody Comes to Rick's at Casablanca.
Oh,
And
sure.
that's not great.
That's not a title. That's
Just do the millennial thing. Do Casablanca, semicolon, or, comma, everybody comes to
Everybody
Rick's.
goes to Rick's.
yeah, turn it
Or-
into a Sufjan Stevens song.
Or
Yes.
you just call it Everybody Throws Their Social Media Away. This
That's
isn't
true.
complicated.
Burnett was like this school teacher, but he went to Austria with his wife in 1938 to get relatives out of there. And so while they were on this trip, they spent a little bit of time in the south of France where a number of crazy things happen. I heard from a very reliable source.
Are there women there, and have they become nude?
Oh, plenty. They do all kinds of things. They're not necessarily fully nude.
Is there anywhere that you can observe them?
Yes, that's my big question.
Boy, I have news for you.
What?
Well, and that's what they did. They went to a nightclub in a small village in the south of France. Everybody was there, right? There were Nazis there. There were French people there. There were people from all over who were vacationers like them from America. And it's like everyone's just kind of hanging out and drinking and playing piano and shit. So he had this idea for a play, and he comes back, and he and Joan Allison hash that out, and they sold it for about $20,000. Some of the sources that you'll say are like, that's a record. I don't know if that's true. Sometimes you see it with more like qualifications, like it's a record for a play that's unproduced at the time or something
yeah.
like that. But
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, but I couldn't find anything that was really and again, this is Hollywood stuff, so there's always a lot of bullshit and sometimes
Myth making. But so
Yeah.
they
sometimes
sell
there's
this
nothing but bullshit, you know.
But they sell this script for Everybody's Coming to Rick's.
Yeah. So this script gets picked up by, you know, in the old studio system, it's really about the producer. The producer is the one who's calling the shots at the end of the day. They're
Right.
the one who's going to like shepherd the movie all the way through. There's no auteur idea. The editors are going to be oftentimes totally separate from the directors. Like the director might not be in the editing room at all. It's like, I did the movie. Now it's the ladies who edit these things. It's their
Yeah.
turn.
Is there a hole in the wall where you can see them edit?
It's a very, very poorly maintained part of the studio.
Just slowly watch them get sleepier over the course of 8 hours.
You can find a copy of the script on the Internet Archive.
Have you read it?
If you, I read a little bit of it before this. I didn't sit down and read the whole thing. I mostly was interested in what the ending looked like.
Sure.
For reasons that we'll talk about later. Also, the way that Sam is portrayed is way more racist.
Racism? 1941? What?
Also, wait a minute. A racist play going up in London in the 90s? Unheard of.
So Hal Wallace hands this script over to the Epstein brothers. Philip and Julius Epstein, no relation. It's just very
right.
unfortunate for everyone with that last name now. So Philip and Julius Epstein are twin brothers who wrote a lot of stuff together. They were very successful playwrights at the time. Their plays are not super well remembered. They went over to Hollywood where they were sometimes credited, sometimes not credited on the work that they were doing. Because if you were a screenwriter, sometimes you were also doing kind of double duty as a script doctor or just, you know, whatever, doing whatever. And so they worked on Arsenic and Old Lace with Frank Capra. They also worked on Why We Fight with Frank Capra.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because of Why We Fight, they actually had to leave production of Casablanca for a while. So then Howard Koch moves in, and Howard Koch got his start with the Mercury Theater. Orson Welles and his people. He wrote the War of the Worlds broadcast.
Wow.
Yeah. When you start going into like the histories of everyone who wrote on Casablanca, like it really is like the Avengers of like old-timey screenwriters.
And the Avengers for actors too. Like and then another screenwriter also comes in. His name is Casey Robinson. I've literally never seen a single fucking movie by Casey Robinson. I was like looking it up. I was like, I have to have seen one of these at some point, but no. But Robinson worked a little bit with the director, Michael Curtiz, who was this Hungarian immigrant who apparently spoke and understood English rather well, but most people couldn't understand his accent on set. Very, very strong accent. They were going to change the ending. We'll talk about the ending when we get to the ending. But like, there was a lot of like, we need to fix this. We need to make this better. We need to change the ending. We need to do all this stuff. And so they were heavily rewriting this screenplay throughout the entire production. People were getting their pages day of. People were getting their pages handwritten during the middle of a scene. Like, here are the new sides in fucking
crazy.
pencil. Yeah. So Humphrey Bogart did not talk to anyone on set because of how chaotic all this was.
Right.
And the only people he did talk to were the director and the writers and the producer to yell at them.
I don't blame him. If I'm being honest.
They went into this with a half-finished script, right?
Yeah.
They started shooting when they had not had the back half, so of course it was going to go over budget.
Right.
Yeah.
They didn't know what the thing was yet.
Yeah, Ingrid Bergman is caught between two different men in this story. She straight up did not know who she was going to end up with.
That's also crazy. I keep saying, wow, that's crazy. I sound like Joe Rogan, but like,
but it is,
It's
right?
crazy.
Like,
It's a crazy movie. And even then, I think a lot of the times, other than the kind of misery on set that people were feeling like, what the fuck is my line in 5 minutes?
right.
right.
People didn't necessarily think of this as being a very remarkable production at all. Studios at this time, right? This is the studio system. This was where movies were made in a factory-like setting. Everybody had just their job to do, and then it went on to the next person. Studios made 50 movies a year. Television had not been widely adopted yet, so people, when they wanted their entertainment, they still went to see plays, especially in the 30s because the Federal Theater Project.
Right.
And people went and saw movies. I mean, you just went and saw a movie every fucking week.
Yeah.
Right? Each studio made one movie a week, essentially. And so you had your pick of like, I'm going to see the MGM one this time. I'm going to go see Shirley Temple, right? Or I'm going to see the Warner Brothers movie this time.
I'm just imagining living at that time and being like, well, sweetie, what do you think we should do this weekend? Oh, I don't know. Maybe we could go to the new MGM film. Well, I say that's a swell idea. That's my impression of a couple.
Now get over here so I can beat you one more time.
Yeah, I was going to say, Josh, the other thing, though, is that it was 1942, so you would not be having this conversation.
You would be at war.
You would be in the war.
It's a really
Yeah,
good.
you would be at war.
In this story that I just told, I am a very, very butch lesbian woman.
Oh,
Great. Okay. Yes. You were assigned sugar and spice at birth. Of course.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess I should say a little bit about Humphrey Bogart here too.
Hell yeah.
At this point, he was a big name. He wasn't exactly the star that he becomes basically because of this movie. He was a very reliable scumbag. Right. So this was the era of like film noir.
Right.
I would say Casablanca is a type of film noir. You have a lot of people who are like, no one's truly noble. There's nobility that you find at the end, but it's like, oh, people sleep around in the way that we're able to depict. People do criminal activity. And Bogart had a little stint in the early 30s, made a few movies in small roles. Then he made his way to the theater. The Federal Theater Project led to an explosion of new plays and new productions. And he was in a play called Petrified Forest. I live close to the Petrified Forest. I have seen this movie. I have read this play.
Me walking into the Petrified Forest.
Yeah. That's you getting petrified?
Yeah.
I thought that was you getting scared like me when I see John Fetterman.
Well, I was so
Like,
scared.
it's an
I was
ogre.
so scared that I became petrified. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That is the effect that Fetterman has on anyone who approaches him these days. It's just immediately Medusa.
So, I grew up not a super long drive away from the Petrified Forest. Went there a lot of times. Saw that there was a movie about it, and Leslie Howard starred in it. They did not want Bogart in the movie.
Oh, okay.
So Bogart plays a side character named Duke Mantee, who's basically John Dillinger. And Leslie Howard was like, well, I'm not going to make the movie unless you get Humphrey into this fucking thing. So that sort of started his second Hollywood career. He was in like 2 or 3 movies that came out that exact year. And then he was, doing noir, playing these criminal roles, doing it very, very well. And then he gets Casablanca, where he's still playing this sort of scumbag character who then redeems himself at the end.
Redeemable scumbag with a heart of gold.
I would just like to also point out that I don't know why this is pointed up, and I haven't been able to figure it out, but in Bogart's, in a biography on Bogart, it is said that he was the first person to say, "Tennis, anyone?" on a Broadway stage, as if that's like an incredibly common thing to say in a Broadway play. It was just like, yeah, but you know who was the first? It was Humphrey Bogart. And I'm like, who was the second?
He was also, incidentally, the last person to say tennis anyone on a Broadway
No,
stage.
who could forget at the end of Death of a Salesman, attention must be paid. And then Biff comes on and is like, tennis anyone? And then we black
the
out.
guy that we associate with the phrase, here's looking at you, kid, as well as like 1,000 others specifically from this movie. No. His crowning achievement was saying, tennis, anyone?
Yeah.
That's about, I mean, other than saying that director Michael Curtiz was an action movie director. He had done like Robin Hood movies and pirate movies, and he was very, very successful working, with Errol Flynn and shit like that. And now he's just doing this romantic melodrama, an anti-Nazi romantic melodrama, when a lot of our anti-Nazi movies were like spy movies and movies about killing. He did not give a shit about the story. Like, he just cared about the shots and the coverage, and he someone said he thought of the movie just in pictures.
And you can really tell at least the action movie background, because a lot of the scenes that are just like negotiations, particularly in like Rick's, are shot like action movie shots. Like there's a lot of panning
the camera's
around.
Moving so much.
Yeah,
you can
so
definitely
frenetic.
like when you watch this, you're like, this is a Spielberg movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can see just how influential this was on this young Arizonan boy who goes and sees it. And he's like, I want cameras to move forever.
Well, I mean, you want to talk about camera movement? We get that right from the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
You know, you get the WB shield with the spinning globe, and then you get some opening exposition, basically.
With the coming of the Second World War, many eyes in imprisoned Europe turned hopefully or desperately toward the freedom of the Americas. Lisbon became the great embarkation point, but not everybody could get to Lisbon directly, and so a tortuous, roundabout refugee trail sprang up. Paris to Marseille, across the Mediterranean to Oran, then by train or auto or foot across the rim of Africa to Casablanca in French Morocco. Here, the fortunate ones, through money or influence or luck, might obtain exit visas and scurry to Lisbon, and from Lisbon to the New World. But the others wait in Casablanca and wait and wait and wait.
There's kind of a pseudo newsreel thing. It doesn't totally commit like Citizen Kane, but it's like you're getting a narration. Here we are in the very recent past, right? This movie comes out, it premieres at the end of 1942, fully releases in early 1943.
Yes.
And it's set just before Pearl Harbor in 1941.
Hey there, you are listening to a preview of a premium episode of The Worst of All Possible Worlds. If you'd like to listen to the rest of this, head on over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/worstofall. And you can listen to not only the rest of this episode, but our entire backlog of premium episodes, bonus episodes, and if you subscribe at the $10 tier, you will get an extra episode of the podcast every single month. Again, that is patreon.com/worstofall. Hope to see you there.